Hello, good people of Ain 2. How are you getting on today? Thanks very much for joining us tonight. The evenings are getting darker, the leaves are getting brighter, and the debate is getting more serious in the Dáil and elsewhere at the moment. So I just want, first of all, thank you all for joining us tonight for this weekly big debate about the issues of importance in the 32 counties of Ireland, North and South. And first of all, I want to just give a special thanks to Dr. Anne McCluskey, who has stepped down from her position of deputy leader of the party. Anne is a great Irish Republican. She's a great United Irelander in the history of Wolfe Tone. She's a fantastic doctor. She's a brave and strong and courageous woman and has done more probably for the right to life in the north of Ireland than many. And I want to thank her very much for her efforts and work in the role of Aontú deputy leader. And she continues, obviously, to be a councillor for us in Derry. And we thank her for all her work and look forward to continued work with her into the future. And also to thank Councillor Denise Mullen, who is a councillor from Mid-Ulster, who has stepped up to the plate and who has become the deputy leader of Aontú. Many will know Denise. She is I suppose, a tireless campaigner for victims and survivors of the Troubles in the north of Ireland for many a long year. She has her own personal experience, which is a very difficult and very sad experience, where her father was killed when she was only 4 years old. And many will have seen the individual who was convicted for her murder, a man by the name of Garfield Beattie, has in recent times been rearrested on the basis of a death threat that has been received by Denise. But she's undeterred to fight for justice for people who have, been murdered and their families by the Glenanne gang in the north of Ireland. And we thank Denise for standing up and taking that position of a deputy leader of Aontú, and she'll be our voice in the north of Ireland. And coming from an SDLP background, she was originally elected as an SDLP councillor. I'm sure she'll appeal and reach out to many people from the SDLP who are heartbroken at the journey that their own party have taken with regards to the issues of the right to life, etc., over the last while. So I see people from Wexford, I see people from Finglas, I see Ballybrack, Slane, Cork, all over the country are joining us tonight for the debate. And thank you very much for doing so. I suppose the first thing that I want to discuss, if I can, is the budget that has just gone by yesterday. So obviously, we are in a very difficult situation in Ireland at the moment. We've had one of the biggest budget deficits will happen this year. We already have a debt of about 220 billion euros. And on the trajectory that we're on at the moment, we will have a debt maybe of 300 billion euros by the time that this government finishes. And that's by far one of the biggest debts per capita of any country in the world. A good chunk of that debt was taken on during the crisis, the banking crisis and the credit crunch that happened a number of years ago. So that's where we're starting from. This year we'll see a over 20 billion euro deficit. That means the country will spend over 20 billion euros that we'll take in, and it will have a similar deficit in 2021. So these are very, very difficult times. They're very difficult, obviously, because of two major threats. That's coronavirus and the restrictions that have been brought in. And also Brexit is happening, and we're very far still away from a deal with regards to Brexit. There's every chance at the moment, I reckon it's a 50-50 chance that there still won't be a deal done with Britain. And as a result, there will be a hard border in Ireland, and there'll also be significant threats for small Indigenous businesses, small to medium Indigenous businesses who are trying to export into Britain as well. So that work continues there. Basically, I suppose we in Aontú launched our first pre-budget submission, a very detailed document that can be seen on our website. And we did it under the basis that we have a number of objectives. First of all, we as a party want to protect life and health. We want to protect those who are personally and economically vulnerable within society. We want to promote and safeguard employment within society. And we want to scale up public services as well to be able to deal with some of the difficulties that the country is facing. So the first thing that we put into a pre-budget submission, which wasn't in the government's budget, unfortunately, was a COVID Impact Commission. And the idea of the COVID Impact Commission was to ascertain what is the actual impact of COVID and the restrictions on society. Right now, we don't have any research as a state into the excess mortality and morbidity that's happening in the country at the moment, the mental health difficulties that are happening within the country, and all of the economic and societal difficulties that exist. And we should have that information. If we are to make proper decisions with regards where we go as a country, we should have that information. That wasn't in the government's budget, unfortunately. Secondly, we asked for a north-south management of this particular crisis. As you know, the north has really high figures with regards to COVID now, and those figures are filtering into ICU and into the health service. Right now, there's 13 spare ICU beds in the north of Ireland at the moment. So obviously new restrictions were introduced today. Many of those restrictions are levelling the restrictions with the south of Ireland. Interestingly enough, they had, up until recently, pubs open. And they're also leaving churches open, which is interesting too. And Becky Keeley, our candidate from Cork Northwest, has been involved significantly in trying to campaign for churches to remain open on this side of the border too, because it's important that people have access to their faith and to their faith community too. So we want an all-Ireland focus on this. It is ridiculous that there isn't, shared cooperation on planning, on budgeting and funding, and on delivery. Once there's a lack of that, there's always going to be a risk, both to society's health and to the economy. And I would say actually resistance to north-south cooperation, is a significant threat to health, and it's not being taken seriously enough by the authorities here, this side of the border or the north of Ireland. So again, that wasn't in the government budget. No money was assigned to that. The big news was that the government was spending about 18 billion euros of money. Now, most of that is going to come from debt. Debt is a bad thing, obviously, for a country. Debt simply robs the future to pay for today. Now, there are occasions, obviously, when debt is the logical solution to fix your country in times of trouble. And everybody knows about the rainy day fund that they will keep in their own home if they can to help them through difficult times. So logically, investment is necessary in this really difficult time. Indeed, AIM2 in our budget submission was asking for the government to do a real significant investment. But it's really important that that money is spent properly, because headlines of 18 billion euros are one thing, but if we don't invest them properly, if we don't invest them into infrastructure and services that will benefit us for years, well, that money can be squandered and flitted away without proper use. We didn't see that in this particular budget. And I'll give you, for example, only 750 million euros out of the 18 billion euros was on capital investment, infrastructure. So things like houses. When you build houses for people who need homes, first of all, you're providing homes for people for 30, 40, 50, 60 years, which is wonderful. Second of all, the state gets the rent for those homes in future. You're not paying rent to the private sector. You're also increasing the housing stock, which puts less pressure on the housing market, which takes down house prices, which benefit everybody. So there was no major announcement with regards to investment in housing, which is a real pity. So 650 houses extra are going to be built next year that were already targeted for. And remember, the state hoped to build 9,500 houses next year. It's still lower than the target of 10,000 houses that were meant to build in 2016. And this is 4 years later throughout that crisis. Second issue around houses that we were really disappointed not to see was any work done on rent freezes. Rents are sky high in this state, and they are well beyond the necessity to pay mortgages, etc., and to return investments. And we wanted a temporary rent freeze to help people get through this. So no talk of that either, unfortunately. We wanted to make sure that the people who were suffering most from the COVID and the restrictions were actually helped the most in this particular budget. And it's long been said, and we have said it from the start, that the restrictions in COVID are hurting those on low and middle income more than anybody else. And they're also hurting people who are younger than the average age in a big way. 35% of the population between the ages of 18 and 25 years old are currently unemployed. And that's a serious figure. Serious now because it's so damaging to people's lives. But also, there's a lot of research done to say that if you are long-term unemployed at that age group, that long-term unemployed experience tends to stay with the individual for years and years on. So we wanted to see investment in that space. Now, there's a PUP payment in this part of the state, and that PUP payment is a payment that's made to people who have lost their jobs through no fault of their own because their businesses were closed. And the idea of that is to help them pay the bills currently. Now, the government cut that radically recently, and there was no fixing of that in this budget. So people on 18,000 euros have had a income decrease, and people on 80,000 euros and 800,000 euros, believe it or not, have actually had a pay increase in this state, which is an incredible situation. And out of the 18 billion euros extra money into the system, the government couldn't find a tenner for pensioners. The people who are most vulnerable and most exposed in this coronavirus society that we live in, they couldn't find a tenner to help those people in these difficult times, which is incredible. We were very frustrated as well with regards rural and regional Ireland and farmers. So farmers basically had no improvements to their incomes. Their incomes currently are very low, about 8.5, maybe 10 grand a year for the average beef farmer at the moment. Nothing done there. There was a number of schemes announced, and a number of existing rural and regional Ireland schemes got a few quid extra. But the truth of the matter is, those schemes in many ways are like social welfare for rural and regional Ireland. What they do is they keep it ticking over, but it's no sea change in the inequalities that exist east-west or urban-rural at all. So we have a city-state with Dublin growing, at an enormous rate, and we want to see Dublin as the engine of the country, but we need to break that trend where, we have that lopsided development. We want to make sure that, hundreds of thousands of people are not spending 2 and 3 hours in their cars going to Dublin every day and going to Belfast as well. And we want to see that regional Ireland and rural Ireland are not emptying out of its younger people, so that vibrancy of youth remains within rural Ireland as well. So nothing was done to break that cycle radically. A few bob here and there was all that was got. 10 million euros was given for that big headline, issue that has been announced over and over again around remote working hubs. We welcome remote working hubs. They're great. They stop people having to travel into Dublin or Belfast. They mean that people can work in their own towns and villages, spend their money in their own towns and villages, and actually live life where they're home for tea at 6 o'clock with their sons and daughters and spouses, where they're not in cars for 3 and 4 hours a day. 10 million is not going to be able to build a proper remote working hub in the level of areas that demand it, unfortunately. The government announced 134 million euros for broadband. You think that's great? Well, unfortunately, it's probably the 4th or 5th time they've announced it. It was announced about 4 years ago for the first time. No extra money or extra development or speeding up of the delivery of broadband yet in rural Ireland, unfortunately. So farmers in rural Ireland didn't get what was necessary. As well, you've seen a carbon tax being introduced, and that carbon tax is especially going to hit people who don't have a alternative way to either heat their homes or to travel. And of course, many people in rural and regional Ireland won't have public transport. Now, that's not to say that there wasn't improvements in the budget. There certainly was, and we welcome the fact that there was €1 billion provided for public transport. That was excellent and well done for that. We need more of that. We also welcome the fact that there were €4 billion announced for health. But the one caveat I put into that is capacity in the health service has been gutted because of COVID. So waiting lists that were 3 years are now often 6 years. So even with this extra €4 billion, the capacity to be able to treat people in comparison to 2019 is still going to be down. So the waiting lists that we enter 2020 with are not actually going to be reduced. If anything, even with that extra investment, there will be increase in future. And I have to say, this wholesale inefficiencies still in our health services that are not being fixed, that need to be fixed to make sure that we get value for money. This state is one of the highest per capita investors in the health service, and we're not getting value for money in the health service whatsoever, unfortunately. So that's where the budget was. We feel that, unfortunately, the government didn't fix their strategy. There is a yo-yo COVID strategy at the moment. That means it's not a rap song. What it means is that there's a let's wait and see what happens in the next 14 days strategy. And the government will dance in and out of particular restrictions on the basis of that. We believe the government are operating in the blind, and they need to develop a COVID-19 impact commission to find out what's the best way to deal with that. 620 new Gardaí, welcome. The only problem is about 450 Gardaí retire on an annual basis at least. And so with demographic changes and with natural retirements, that 650 is close to standing still, unfortunately. The Children's Hospital is rising currently in cost at the moment, which is a major problem. That's going to suck up a significant proportion of the investment in this country coming to the future. The government didn't do anything about vulture funds. You probably know the vulture funds are sucking up a whole lot of housing stock. They're controlling the market. They're increasing rents. The UN even condemned the government's provision of extra help to vulture funds within the market. And vulture funds basically push out first-time buyers, young families who want to purchase houses as well, which is incredible. We do believe Aintu is a Keynesian counter-cyclical party, and in, I suppose, English, that means when the economy is down, we do invest into the economy. But we believe that there needs to be investment in infrastructure, in rail lines, like the rail line to my own hometown in Navan, like rail lines in the west of the country, deep sea ports in the likes of Rosslare, the A5 between Dublin and Derry. We need to make sure that there's proper infrastructure around the border. One of the issues we wanted to see was a replication of the Western Development Commission, which would be a border development zone, whereby the counties along the border, both sides of the border, would be knitted together in a closer economic way, and investment and benefits and advantages will be given to businesses that operate in the border zone, so we can develop the economy there, especially with the threat of Brexit happening as well. The other issue, just to briefly say, is that the government have, I believe, let down older people in this particular budget with regards to investment, with regards to services. They've also let down people with disabilities. Many people with disabilities are still waiting to gain access to day services. Since March, many of these day services have been closed completely. Some of these day services opened up in around September, but only partially, which means that a person with a disability may have access for 1 day a week or 2 days a week as well, and that needs to change. Education is really important for everybody, and people with disabilities shouldn't be treated any differently. They need access to education. We also know that respite services are not operating properly as well for families with a family member with a disability. We need to make sure that people have access to respite in these difficult times. There are the main headlines from the budget. We will continue as a political movement to make sure that we put it up to the government to make sure that they invest the money properly, efficiently, prudently, responsibly. We are a party that is socially responsible, i.e. we want to make sure that we protect society, but we are not a party that will accept the inefficient spending of money, because that money comes out of somebody's pocket, either today or in the generations in the future. Um, Obviously, today is a big day with regards north-south COVID restrictions. The numbers are rising, and it looks like it's going to prove a significant challenge over the next month. And what I would just say to people, be careful and do the easy things, the simple things, the low-hanging issues. They help and they make an enormous difference for people. But also stay in touch with individuals because we're social animals. We need stability to be able to engage with each other, to have the crack with each other, to socialize with each other, and to have positive experience with each other. And if there's anything that's necessary more now than ever before, it's that Irish ability to have the crack, to enjoy each other's company, and to support each other, and to be there for each other as well. So that's very, very important. In our own offices here in County Meath, we have a food bank that's operating in Trim. Aisling Lowe is the manager of the food bank, and she does a tremendous job. And that food bank is available to people who are in need in my own county. And if they need food or if they need lunches for students, they're very welcome to give us a call, and we'll do our best to get that food to them as well. Look in on neighbours and friends, make sure that people are not isolated in these times, and stay tuned. And obviously, Ain2 continues to grow. We're operating on the ground, we're physically operating in certain communities, but we're also operating online. We have a great Facebook page. Many of you will be looking at this Facebook page now. We'd ask people to like and share that Facebook page. Make sure that friends and family clock into it, because we are a unique political party. There is no other political party like us, and as a result, the media don't tend to give us the same space that they give other political parties. So our social media is one of the most important ways for ourselves to communicate to people. We have an Instagram account, we have a Twitter account, and I'd ask people to do their best to join it. We have also a very good website, ain2.ie, which a lot of our media goes up onto, and also the media that's generated by our members throughout the country is put up there as well. So if people want to have a look at that, they should check it out. I would ask people to get off the fence as well. If change needs activism, membership plus activism equals change. It's a very, very simple formula. And the first step to do that is to log on to the website, ain2.ie, and simply hit the membership button, put your name down there. We will contact you over the next couple of weeks. We plug you into a common, like-minded people, decent, upstanding, decent people who work together for our common objectives. And little by little, we're growing currently throughout communities. We're getting involved in community campaigns, bread and butter issues that are really involved in people. And there's a great joy in that type of work. First of all, you meet like-minded people, you have the crack with them, there's a camaraderie that grows from it, there's relationships and friendships that grows from it. Secondly, there's a skill and element to it. So by getting involved in those issues, people find that their own particular skills improve. And we're not asking people to be ready-made individuals or activists or politicians. People come from all different backgrounds into our movements. Many, I would say most people come from no political background and no political experience. But when they get involved, they start to gain that experience. They start to grow in themselves and gain lots of new skills. And the third issue why that activism is so beneficial is because you actually get to see your community improve as a result. So even if it's setting up a residents association or a neighborhood watch scheme or a tidy towns or a litter pick, even if it's getting involved in a food bank or delivering food parcels or doing errands for older people within society, or it's a campaign that we're involved in many areas is getting public derelict buildings back into community use, or even if it's getting involved in a hospital campaign or a transport campaign or a schools campaign. When you work like that, you basically, over the years, you see your community improve. And, there's no doubt in my mind that that type of activism means that your community will be unrecognizably better after a number of years than it would have been if you had sat back and done nothing. And that type of work, it doesn't take that much. It's maybe an hour every fortnight or so, but it makes a serious difference. And the last reason why that type of activism is important is because to see the big picture objectives that we have for improving Ireland, those big campaigns, we have a much better opportunity in achieving those. Because when we do that work, people in local communities, first of all, they get to know us, then they get to like us, they get to trust us, and after a while, they get to vote for us. And when they do that, we return increasing numbers to councils around Ireland, to Leinster House, and to Stormont, where we can actually radically make change to the objectives that we want. It's very, very simple equation. Membership plus activism equals change. And as I say before, I am no more responsible for Ireland than anybody else. So step up to the plate, plug into the website, join up, and we look forward to working for you in the future. Míle buíochas, we're going to leave it at that for tonight. Join us again next week for the big debate. And Ihawa, slán full.